The night sky over the alien world was painted with two moons. One was pale white, the other a glowing red. Together, they poured soft light across the thick forest below. Tall trees rose like towers, their branches twisted and sharp. Strange calls echoed to the dark, from creatures that never dared step into the open. The air was heavy, filled with the smell of damp earth and old leaves. At the center of this wild land, a small group of hunters moved. They belonged to the Virexi, a reptile-like species feared across many worlds. Their bodies were tall and strong, covered in dark scales that blended with the shadows. Their eyes glowed faint yellow, cutting through the night like fire. Each hunter carried a spear tipped with sharp bone and metal. Their steps were silent, practiced through generations of hunting. But tonight's hunt was different. They were not chasing prey for food. They were not hunting beasts for sport. Tonight, they searched for something forbidden, something their laws demanded must never survive. A cub, not an animal cub, but the young of their own kind. A weakling, born with pale scales and small lungs. In Virexi culture, weakness was shame. Any child who did not meet their harsh standards was cast out or destroyed. Mercy did not exist in their world. Survival was their only law. The hunters whisper among themselves as they search the undergrowth. "The trail is fresh," hissed one, pointing at broken branches. "It cannot be far." Another leaned close to the ground, sniffing the faint scent left behind. "It is slowing. It will not last long." The leader of the group raised his hand. His scarred face showed no pity, only duty. "Then we finish this quickly." The elders commanded it. "No weak blood may stain our line." The hunters spread out, moving like shadows between the trees. Their sharp eyes scanned every corner, every hole, every rock where the cub might hide. The cub itself was small, barely able to walk without stumbling. Its scales were a faint silver, unlike the dark green of its hunters. It gasped for air with every step, its chest rattling as if each breath might be its last. Yet its eyes, bright, wide, and filled with fear, burned with the will to live. It stumbled across roots and rocks, dragging itself forward. Its tiny claws left marks on the soil, clear signs for the hunters to follow. The cub knew it was being chased. Instinct told it death was close behind. But even in its weakness, it refused to stop. A rustle in the bushes made the cub freeze. A spearhead glimmered through the leaves, inches from its face. The cub cried out, a sharp sound that echoed in the silent night. The hunter stepped forward, lifting his weapon high. "End of the trail," he hissed. But before the spear could strike, a roar thundered through the forest. Not the roar of a beast, not the hiss of a Virexi. It was a human voice. "Leave it." The hunter froze. The cub turned its head and saw a figure step out from the shadows. The human was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn armor scratched from many battles. His face was pale compared to the Virexi, but his eyes blazed with fire and defiance. In his hands, he carried no spear, only a simple staff of metal. Yet the way he held it made it seem more dangerous than any blade. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, hissing, "This is not your concern, human. The weak must fall. That is our law." The man did not move aside. His voice was calm but firm. "Not tonight. Not while I stand here." The hunters snarled, their claws twitching, their spears ready. No alien dared defy their law before. No one ever stood between them and their duty. But the human did not fear them. His stance showed strength. His eyes showed something more, something the Virexi did not understand. The cub crawled closer to the man's feet, hiding behind his legs. It trembled, but its eyes never left him. For the first time, it felt something new. Safety. The leader hissed louder, anger rising. "You protect weakness? Foolish creature. That cub will only bring ruin. Step aside or share its fate. The human's grip tightened on his staff. His voice rose like thunder. Then come and take it. The forest held its breath. The night air grew thick with tension. The hunters crouched, ready to strike. The man braced himself, ready to fight. The hunt had begun, but it would not end as the Virexi expected. For the first time in this world's long history, a human stood between predator and prey. And in that stand, something far greater was about to be born. Not just a battle, not just defiance, but a story of survival, of mercy, of courage, a story that would echo through the stars. The cub whimpered, clutching the man's boot. The human looked down for a brief moment, and though he said nothing, his gaze spoke clearly. You are not alone. I will not give up on you. Above them, the twin moons burned brighter, as if they, too, wished to witness what was about to unfold. The hunt was no longer just a hunt. It was war. The forest was still, as if every creature sensed what was about to happen. The human stood tall, staff in hand, his body framed by the glow of the twin moons. The Virexi hunters crouched low, their spears raised, eyes locked on him. Between them, the tiny cub trembled, clutching the man's boot, afraid to even breathe. The leader of the hunters broke the silence first. His deep hiss carried through the trees. Human, you stand in the way of law. No outsider may decide what lives or dies in our clan. His fangs glistened in the pale light. This cub is doomed. Step aside. The man did not move. He planted his staff in the ground, his voice calm but unshakable. Your law is cruel. Mercy is not weakness. If your people cannot see that, then they are blind. The hunters hissed in rage, their tails whipping the ground. One of them stepped forward and pointed a spear at the man's chest. You dare insult the Virexi? The human met the hunter's gaze without fear. I dare. That single word hit like thunder. The leader roared, and the hunters surged forward. The clash began. The first spear lunged toward the man, fast and sharp, but he twisted his body, swinging his staff in a smooth arc. The spear shaft cracked under the blow, snapping in two. The hunter stumbled back, hissing in pain. Another came from the side, thrusting low. The man slammed his boot down on the spear's tip, pinning it to the earth. With a sharp swing, he struck the hunter across the face, sending him crashing into a tree. The cub squealed and tried to crawl away, but the man shifted his stance to shield it, always keeping his body between the hunters and the child. The leader circled him, eyes narrow. You fight well, human, but there are 5 of us and 1 of you. You cannot win. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. Maybe not, but you'll bleed before I fall. The hunters attacked together this time, their movement swift and deadly. Spears flashed in the moonlight, claws slashed through the air. The man's staff moved like an extension of his arm, blocking, striking, spinning. With cracked metal rang, growls filled the night. One hunter leapt onto a branch and dived from above. The man rolled aside, swinging his staff upward. The strike caught the creature midair, slamming it to the ground with a heavy thud. Another slash at his back, but the man spun, staff sweeping across the attacker's legs. The hunter crashed into the dirt, howling. The cub pressed itself into the ground, eyes wide. It had never seen such a thing. A single being standing against death, not for himself, but for another. The leader of the hunters snarled, furious at his warrior's failure. Enough games! He raised his own spear, larger and heavier than the rest. His scales bore scars of many battles, his arms strong from years of killing. This was no ordinary hunter. He was the executioner of the clan. He charged. The clash of leader and human shook the air. The spear struck like lightning, but the man's staff met it with equal force. Sparks flew where metal scraped metal. Each strike came harder, faster, until the ground shook beneath their feet. The man grunted with the effort, sweat running down his brow. His arms ached, his breath grew heavy, but he refused to yield. Every strike he blocked, every swing he returned, carried the same message. You will not have the cub. The leader hissed and slashed the spear in a wide arc. The man ducked low, rolling to the side. The spear carved deep into a tree, snapping in half. As the leader pulled it free, the man swung his staff into his chest. The blow cracked against the scales, forcing the leader back a step. But the leader only laughed, a deep and terrible sound. Impressive, human, yet you cannot last. Your body will tire. Mine will not. The man's chest heaved, but his eyes stayed fierce. We'll see. The fight raged on. The other hunters, bruised and shaken, circled again, waiting for a chance to strike. They hissed curses, their pride wounded by this strange outsider. The cub whimpered, pulling itself to its feet. It wanted to run, but its tiny body could barely move. Still, it stayed close to man, too afraid to leave him, too afraid to be alone. Minutes dragged like hours. The man's staff cracked against scales, bones, and spears. The forest floor was torn by claws and boots. Blood dripped from shallow cuts on the man's arms, but he stood unbroken. The hunters bore their own wounds, snarling, enraged, humiliated. Finally, the leader roared and thrust the spear with all his strength. The man swung his staff sideways, knocking the spear off course. The two weapons locked, pressing against each other with crushing force. The leader leaned close, his breath hot and foul. Why? Why protect this useless thing? It is weak. It is nothing. The man's voice was quiet, but stronger than any roar, because someone must. With a sudden surge, he twisted his staff, breaking the lock. He slammed the end of it into the leader's jaw. The massive reptile staggered back, dazed. The man raised the staff high, ready to strike again, but stopped. He saw the cub staring up at him, its eyes wide, its tiny chest heaving. It was looking not just at him, but into him, into his choice, into his mercy. The man lowered his weapon. He would not kill unless forced. He would defend, protect, stand, but not become what they were. The leader wiped blood from his mouth and hissed, furious, "You will regret this weakness." He barked a command, and the hunters pulled back. They hissed their anger, but obeyed, dragging their wounded away. The leader's eyes burned with hate. This is not over, human. You have stolen what is ours to end. The elders will know, and when they do, no corner of this world will hide you. The man watched them vanish into the forest. Only when the night grew still again did he drop to one knee, his chest heaving, his body aching. The cub crawled closer, placing its tiny claw on his arm. Its eyes were wet, but not from fear alone. Something else shone within them, a spark. The man gave a faint smile. You're safe. For now. He looked up at the sky. The moon still glowed, but clouds gathered around them. A storm was coming, and not just from the sky. The human knew the truth. This fight was only the beginning. The Virexi would not forgive his defiance. They would come again, with more hunters, with greater fury. He had made himself an enemy of their law. But as he looked at the cub beside him, fragile yet alive, he also knew he could not turn back. The clash was not only between him and the hunters. It was between mercy and cruelty, between the old law of the strong and the new chance for something greater. He rose to his feet, staff in hand, and lifted the cub into his arms. It was light, trembling, but it nestled against his chest, clinging to him. The man whispered softly, though no one was there to hear but the cub and the night, "I will not give up on you, no matter what comes." The forest seemed to breathe again. The wind stirred the leaves. Distant cries of beasts echoed far away. The clash was over, but the war had only just begun. The forest had fallen quiet after the clash, but the silence did not bring peace. It was a heavy silence before a storm, thick with warning. The human stood with the cub in his arms, staff still clenched in his hand. His muscles ached from battle, his skin stung from shallow cuts, but his eyes stayed sharp. The Virexi hunters had retreated, but he knew it was not victory. It was delay. They would not forgive. They would not stop. They would return with more. The cub shifted weakly in his arms, pressing its small head against his chest. Its breaths came rough and shallow, but it no longer shook with fear. Instead, it clung to him, as if it understood that this strange creature, this human, was the only shield between it and death. The man whispered low, "We have to move. They'll come back." He adjusted the staff across his back, holding the cub close, and set off into the night. The forest was vast, stretching across hills and valleys like an endless sea of green. Strange plants glowed faintly in the dark, shedding ghostly light on the path. Creatures stirred in the undergrowth, their eyes glinting, but none dared approach the human. Something about his presence, his scent of battle, kept them at bay. His boots sank into soft moss, and his breath came hard. The fight had drained him more than he wanted to admit. Each step was heavy, yet he kept walking. Stopping meant death, not for him alone, but for the cub as well. Hours passed. The moons moved higher, then began to sink. Dawn was still far away. The cub stirred, its small voice weak but clear. "Why, help!" The human glanced down, surprised it could already speak. Its voice was soft, broken, like wind through cracked stone. "Because you deserve a chance," he answered simply. "No one deserves to be hunted for being different." The cub blinked slowly, as if the words were strange, foreign. Different means weak. Weak must fall. The man shook his head. "No, different means hope. It means change." The cub fell quiet, staring at him with wide eyes, as though trying to understand something it had never been taught. By midnight, the human reached a ridge. He stopped, setting the cub down gently, and scanned the forest below. His eyes narrowed. In the distance, faint lights flickered between the trees. Torches. The hunters were already searching again. The man's jaw tightened. "They're moving faster than I thought." The cub whimpered. "They come." "Yes," the man said, picking it back up, "which is why we keep going." He turned and made his way along the ridge, choosing paths that wound upward into rougher ground. The higher he climbed, the steeper the rocks became, but he trusted the heights to slow their pursuers. The Virexi were strong hunters, but their heavy frames were less suited for climbing than his. The cub coughed softly against his chest, each breath sharp. He felt its frailty and knew the truth. It could not endure forever. If he pushed too hard, the cub would collapse. Yet if he slowed, the hunters would catch them. A cruel choice. But he refused to let the cub die either way. Near dawn, they reached a narrow cave hidden behind a curtain of vines. The man slipped inside, ducking low. The cave smelled of damp stone, but it was deep enough to hide them for a time. He set the cub down on a bed of moss and crouched beside it. The child's scales shimmered faintly silver in the dim light, unlike the dark tones of its kind. Its chest rose and fell with labored effort, but its eyes never closed. "You need rest," the man said. "We'll wait here until nightfall." The cub looked up at him. "Why fight them? They are many. You are one." The man's gaze softened. "Because sometimes one is enough. If one person chooses to stand, others may follow, even against many." The cub's eyes glistened with something new, something it had never felt before. Not fear, not shame, but hope. The man dozed lightly, his ears sharp to every sound. When he woke again, faint sunlight filtered through the vines. The cub still lay curled in the moss, breathing softly. For the first time since he had seen it, the child looked at peace. But peace did not last. The man's ears caught a faint hiss outside. Voices. Hunters. He grabbed his staff and crouched near the entrance. Shadows passed across the vines. The hunters were moving past, close, too close. The cub stirred, sensing them. Its eyes went wide, fear returning. The man pressed a finger to his lips. "Quiet." The hunters' voices grew louder, then began to fade as they moved further downhill. They had missed the cave for now. The man let out a slow breath. That was close. But he knew they could not stay. Once the sun set, the search would tighten. The Virexi would sweep every ridge, every hollow. When the evening came, he lifted the cub again. "Time to move. We can't hide forever." They traveled through the night, crossing ravines and climbing jagged cliffs. The cub held on with weak claws, its small body trembling but refusing to let go. Each step carried them deeper into the wilds, far from the villages and patrols of the Virexi. Yet no matter how far they went, the man felt the hunters pressing closer, like shadows always behind. At dawn, they reached the ruins of an old outpost. Rusted walls crumbled under vines, and broken towers leaned like tired giants. The man slipped inside, searching carefully. The place smelled of age and dust, but it offered cover. He set the cub down on a cracked stone bench. "We'll rest here for a while." The cub looked around with wide eyes. "What is this place?" "An old station," the man said. "Humans built it long ago, when they first came to this world. But it was abandoned." The cub touched the wall with a tiny claw. "Why did you leave?" The man's eyes grew distant. "Not strong enough to hold it. The Virexi drove us out. My people scattered." The cub tilted its head. "Then why return?" The man looked at it, his gaze steady. "Because someone has to stand again, and maybe this time it starts with you." The peace of the ruins did not last long. As the sun rose higher, the sound of claws scraping stone echoed outside. The hunters had followed. The man's grip tightened on his staff. He had hoped for more time. He had none. The cub crawled close, fear in its eyes. "They come again." The man nodded. "Yes, and we will face them again." The cub shook its head weakly. "You will die." "Maybe," the man said softly, "but not today." He lifted the cub into his arms and slipped through a broken wall, vanishing into the deeper ruins. The hunters entered moments later, hissing and growling, their yellow eyes glowing in the dark halls. The flight continued, not across open forests this time, but through broken corridors and fallen towers, where every corner hid danger. The man's boots pounded against stone. The cub clung to him, heart racing. The hunters' voices echoed behind, growing closer. Every step was a choice. Fight or flee, hide or push forward. And every step carried the same truth. He could not give up, not while the cub still breathed. The storm had begun, and the chase would not end until one side fell. But as the human pressed onward, carrying the fragile cub through shadows and ruins, a fire burned in his chest. This was no longer just flight. It was destiny in motion. The ruins whispered with age. Every broken wall, every crumbling tower, seemed to remember battles long past. Dust floated in the shaft of light that pierced through cracks in the ceiling. The human moved carefully through the ancient place. The cub held tight against his chest. Behind them, the hiss of hunters echoed like a curse. They were close. The man ducked into a shadowed corridor, his boots crunching over broken stone. His breath was heavy, but his eyes were sharp. He had fought, fled, and hidden for 2 nights, but the chase never ended. The Virexi would not stop until the cub lay dead, or until he himself was slain. The cub stirred, whispering weakly, "Tired, can't go more." The man slowed, pressing the child gently against his shoulder. "I know," he said softly, "but we'll rest soon, just a little further." His words were calm, steady, though his heart beat fast. He could not let the cub see his fear. Children carried enough of their own. The ruins opened into a wide chamber. Broken pillars leaned at angles, and vines crawled across the stone floor. In the center stood a giant slab carved with strange symbols. Once, perhaps, it had been a place of command or worship. Now, it was a tomb for memories. The man set the cub down upon the slab. The child curled up exhausted, its silver scales glowing faintly in the dim light. The human knelt beside it. "Rest. I'll hold them here." The cub's eyes widened. "You stay and fight?" The man's lips curved in a faint smile. "I've been running long enough." The cub shook its head weakly. "Too many. You will fall." "Then I fall," the man said, "but not before they know what it means to face a human." The cub's eyes glistened, but it said nothing more. Its small claws reached out and touched his hand. The man gripped him gently for a moment, then rose, turning toward the entrance of the chamber. The hunters arrived soon after. Their yellow eyes glowed in the darkness as they slipped through the broken archways. They spread out, surrounding the chamber like wolves closing on prey. The leader was with them again, his scarred body looming, his spear still stained from the last fight. His voice hissed like venom. You should have fled off-world. Human. Here, you stand alone. Here, you die. The man gripped his staff and planted his feet firmly. His eyes burned with defiance. Maybe, but you'll remember me. The leader's jaw tightened. Fool, protecting weakness has made you weak. The man lifted his staff. No, it has made me strong. The chamber exploded with motion. Hunters rushed in from all sides, their spears flashing. The man swung his staff in wide arcs, each strike ringing with force. What cracked against bone, metal clashed against stone. The air filled with snarls and grunts. One hunter lunged low, but the man slammed the staff's end down, breaking its jaw. Another leapt from a pillar, claws extended. The man twisted, striking midair, sending the creature sprawling. The cub watched with wide eyes, its tiny body trembling. For the first time in its life, it saw someone stand not to destroy it, but to protect it. Each swing of the human staff was not just a strike. It was a promise. But the hunters were many. Their attacks came faster, harder, their rage fueled by shame. The man's arms burned with strain. His breath tore at his chest. Blood ran from cuts on his side. The leader stepped forward at last, towering over the fight. His spear thrust with brutal speed, slamming into the staff and forcing the man back. The force rattled his bones. You tire human, the leader sneered. Your strength drains, but ours endures. The man's teeth clenched. He struck back, swinging his staff into the leader's ribs. The blow landed, but the creature barely flinched. Still, the man did not back down. His voice rang clear. Strength isn't endless, even yours. But that never breaks. The leader roared and swung again. The staff cracked under the spear's edge, splintering. The man stumbled, gripping what remained of his weapon. The hunters hissed in triumph. The human was cornered, his weapon broken, his body weary. Yet his eyes never dimmed. He dropped the shattered staff and raised his fists. His voice thundered through the chamber. You will not touch the child. The hunters hesitated, unsettled by the fire in his voice. Even the leader faltered for a heartbeat. Then they surged forward again. The man fought barehanded, striking with fists and boots. Every blow he gave, every wound he took was for the cub. Blood splattered the stone floor, but he stayed on his feet. The cub cried out, small but sharp, No, don't. Its voice pierced the chamber like a blade. For the first time, the hunters froze, not because of fear, but because the weak one they hunted dared to shout. The leader turned his head slowly toward the child. His eyes narrowed. It speaks. The cub shivered but did not look away. Its tiny body trembled, but its voice rose again. Stop. You cannot win. He will not let you. The leader's lips curled. Foolish little thing. He cannot stand forever. The cub's voice cracked, but it shouted again. He does not stand alone. The word struck the man's heart like fire. He felt strength surge back into his weary limbs. The cub's courage, small as it was, became his own. He roared and slammed into the hunters, striking with renewed fury. His fists crashed against their jaws. His boots shattered their balance. He fought not as one man, but as something greater, an unbroken will. The battle raged until the chamber floor was littered with fallen hunters. Some lay groaning. Others crawled back toward the shadows. Only the leader remained, standing tall, his chest heaving. The man faced him, bloodied but unyielding. It ends here. The leader bared his fangs. Yes, with your death. He lunged, spear flashing. The man sidestepped, grabbing the shaft with both hands. They struggled, straining against each other, muscles burning. The spear's tip scraped the stone, sending sparks across the floor. The cub cried out, Fight! The man twisted suddenly, wrenching the spear from the leader's grip. With one motion, he swung it back, the tip stopping inches from the creature's throat. The leader froze. His eyes blazed with rage, but he did not move. The man's voice was steady. Leave, or fall. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then the leader hissed low. This is not the end, human. You have shamed us. You have defied the law. The elders will bring judgment. He backed away, his warriors limping after him. Soon, their shadows vanished into the ruins. The chamber fell quiet again. The man dropped the spear, his body shaking with exhaustion. He fell to one knee, breathing hard. The cub crawled toward him, its small claws tugging at his arm. You stood. You did not fall. The man smiled faintly, though pain filled his body. Neither did you. The cub pressed close to him, silver scales glinting in the dim light. Together, he wrapped an arm around it, holding the fragile child against his chest. His voice was soft but certain. Yes, together. Above them, the broken ceiling revealed the sky. The first light of dawn touched the ruins, painting them gold. The long night had ended, but the war ahead stretched wider than the horizon. The man knew the truth. The hunters would return. The elders would not forgive. But now, it was no longer just his fight. The cub had stood too. Weakness had spoken, and in that voice, the seeds of change had been planted. The stand was only the beginning. The ruins were quiet, but the quiet was heavy with danger. The human leaned against a broken wall, his body aching from wounds. Blood stained his torn armor, and every breath cut deep into his chest. The cub pressed close against him, its silver scales glowing faintly in the morning light. They had survived the stand, but survival was not victory. The hunters would return. The elders would not forget. And the man knew they had little time. He looked down at the cub. We can't stay. They'll come again, stronger than before. The cub's eyes, bright and uncertain, met his. Where go? The man tightened his grip on his staff, now cracked, but still useful. His gaze shifted toward the horizon, where jagged mountains cut the sky. North, beyond the ridges. There are caves hidden deep. If we reach them, we can rest, maybe find others. The cub tilted its head. Others like you? The man's jaw tightened. Maybe, if they survived. They left the ruins at dawn. The forest stretched endless before them, dark and wild. Strange calls echoed in the distance, creatures stirring as the world woke. The man moved with steady steps, though every muscle begged for rest. The cub clung to his side, its breath uneven, but it did not complain. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, burning away the mist. The man kept the shadows, slipping through ravines, crossing streams, always moving north, but he felt eyes upon them. The hunters were out there, searching. At midday, he stopped near a waterfall to drink. Cool water eased his throat, but his ears caught a sound above the rushing stream. Stones shifting. He looked up. A shadow moved. The man grabbed the cub and rolled aside just as a spear slammed into the ground where they had stood. Dust burst upward. More spears followed, hissing through the air. Hunters. They leapt from the cliffs, snarling, their yellow eyes burning. Their claws tore into ground as they landed, circling fast. The man raised his staff, standing tall despite his pain. Stay behind me, he told the cub. The hunters hissed an answer and lunged. The fight was brutal and quick. The man swung his staff, knocking one aside, then kicked another into the stream. He moved like a cornered beast, each strike desperate but fierce. Yet the hunters pressed harder. One cut across his arm, another slashed his back. He stumbled, blood dripping into the water. The cub cried out, "No!" The man forced himself up, staff cracking against the hunter's skull. The creature dropped, but two more closed in. His strength was fading fast. Then the cub did something neither man nor hunter expected. It leapt forward, standing between the human and the attackers. Its small chest rose and fell with effort, its eyes blazing silver. And though its voice was weak, it shouted, "Leave him." The hunters froze for a heartbeat. Weakness did not speak. Weakness did not defy. Yet this cub did. The man seized the moment, swinging his staff with all his strength. The hunters reeled back, snarling, their formation broken. He grabbed the cub and ran, plunging into the stream. Water splashed high as he waded across, climbing the opposite bank. Behind them, the hunters hissed in fury, their voices echoing through the valley. But the human did not stop. He ran, carrying the cub close, each step heavy, each breath sharp. By dusk, they reached the ridges. Jagged cliffs rose like teeth, cutting the sky in dark shapes. The man searched quickly, his eyes scanning the stone. At last, he found a narrow crevice hidden between boulders. He slipped inside, pressing into the darkness. The cub clung to him, trembling. "They follow." "Yes," the man whispered. His voice was steady, though he could still hear the hunter's cries far below. "But the mountains are cruel. They won't find us easily here." The cub nestled against his chest, exhausted. "Why not leave me? Would be easier." The man looked down at it, his eyes soft despite the pain carved into his face. "Because you're not a burden. You're the reason I keep moving." The cub blinked, its silver eyes shimmering. "Reason?" "Yes," he said. "You matter, even if they say you don't." The child pressed close, silent but warm. Night fell. Stars spread across the sky, sharp and cold. The human sat in the crevice, staff across his knees, the cub curled against his side. The wind howled through the peaks, carrying the distant hiss of hunters still searching. But for now, they were safe. The man closed his eyes briefly, letting the weight of exhaustion press over him. Tomorrow, the chase would continue. Tomorrow, the hunters would come again. But tonight, under the stars, he had kept his promise. The cub was still alive, and that was enough. Far from the ridges where the man and the cub hid, the great city of the elders rose from black stone. Its towers curled upward like claws, catching the pale moonlight. At the heart of it stood the council hall, a vast chamber lit by blue fire. Here the elders gathered. 12 of them, robed in crimson, sat in a circle carved from obsidian. Their eyes glowed faintly, old and cold. Around them, the air smelled of smoke and blood. No laughter filled this place, only whispers that could cut deeper than blades. The high elder, whose horns were long and twisted, struck his staff upon the floor. The sound echoed to the chamber like thunder. "Speak," he commanded. A hunter limped forward, his armor cracked, his jaw torn where the human staff had struck. He bowed low, his body trembling before the 12. "The cub lives," the hunter spat. His voice dripped with shame. "The human protects it. We struck, but he fought with fire. We failed." The hall grew silent. The high elder leaned forward. "Failed? Against one man and a broken child." The hunter bowed lower, claws scraping stone. "He is not like others of his kind. He fights with strength beyond reason. He should not still breathe." The elders exchanged dark looks. Some sneered, some narrowed their eyes. Elder Vera, whose voice was sharp as glass, spoke first. "This proves what I warned. Humans do not bend. They do not yield. Even broken, they resist." Another elder, gray and ancient, hissed back. "Then why allow them here? Kill them all. Burn their bones." The chamber shook with growls and whispers, every voice rising. But the high elder raised the staff once more, and silence fell. "We will not act in haste," he said. "This is not only about the cub or the man. This is about order. If weakness is allowed to breathe, then our law is broken. If a human can defy us and live, then our rule is broken." His words cut deep into the hall. The elders nodded slowly, their pride burning hotter than flame. Elder Vera leaned forward, her eyes glittering. "Then we must crush them both, not with hunters, but with fear. Let the world see what becomes of those who defy the council." "How?" asked another. "The cub is small, the man wounded. Yet every strike we make, he escapes." Already whispers spread. Already doubts grow. The high elder turned his gaze toward the great stone map at the center of the hall. With a claw, he traced the ridges where the man now hid. "Then we will not chase," he said. "We will close every path. Smoke them out. Starve them. And when they crawl into the open, broken and gasping, the world will see. The cub will die before all. The human will die slower." The council hummed with approval. Their eyes gleamed in the firelight, cold and merciless. But one voice broke through. A young elder, smallest among them, shifted uneasily. His horns were short, his robes less grand. Yet his voice, though quiet, carried weight. "High elder," he said, Is it wise to press so hard? The cub is weak, yes. But if it survives, does that not mean it carries strength in within? Perhaps it is not weakness at all. Perhaps. The high elder's staff slammed down with a crack. Silence. The young elder lowered his head, though his eyes still burned. The chamber was not a place for mercy. It was a place for rule. The high elder rose to his feet, towering above all. This is not a debate. Weakness must be destroyed. Order must stand. The cub is doomed. The human who shielded is doomed. And their doom will feed our strength. The council struck the floor with their staffs in unison. The sound rolled like thunder, shaking the very walls. The hunter bowed again, blood dripping from his wounds. What would you have me do, High Elder? The answer came sharp and final. Take your kin. Seal the mountains. Burn the forests. Drive them out. And when you find them, bring the cub alive. The man bring in pieces. The hunter's grin spread, cruel and eager. He bowed once more and left the hall, his footsteps echoing into the night. Outside, the city stirred. Fires burned brighter, drums beat louder. Armies gathered in the streets, claws striking stone in rhythm. The hunters sharpened their spears, their eyes fixed on the ridges to the north. The council had spoken. The hunt would not stop. Far beyond the city walls, hidden in the cold crevice of stone, the human and the cub slept in uneasy peace. They did not yet know the storm that was coming. They did not yet hear the drums of war or the voices that had sworn their doom. But soon the mountains would burn, and the world would watch. The mountains groaned with fire. Smoke climbed into the sky, black and heavy, as flames devoured the forest below. The hunters had followed the High Elder's command, burning, sealing, driving. Every path closed. Every cave smoked out. The man woke to sound the cub coughing, its small body trembling in the ash-filled air. He held it close, covering its face with his torn cloak. The heat pressed against his skin, but his eyes were cold and steady. "They're coming," he whispered. The cub blinked weakly, silver eyes dim but not gone. "Can we run?" The man shook his head. "No, not this time." He rose to his feet, staff in hand. His body was broken, bruised, bloodied from battles past. Yet something inside him burned brighter than pain. He looked out from the cliff edge, where the valley spread below. Shadows moved through the smoke. Hunters climbing, spears flashing in the firelight. The council had sent an army. The man's grip tightened. He turned to the cub. "Stay behind me. No matter what you see, stay." The cub's small claws dug into the stone. "But you'll die." He gave a faint smile, sharp and tired. "Maybe, but not before they learn why humans are feared." The first wave came fast, climbing the rocks with shrieks. The man stood tall, his staff striking downward. Stone cracked. One hunter fell screaming into the fire below. Another lunged, claws slashing, but the staff caught its throat and broke it clean. The cub watched, heart pounding, as the human fought with fury that no wound could dull. Every strike was heavy. Every move was sharp. Yet the hunters did not stop. More climbed. More hissed. The man's chest heaved, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. Still he did not fall. He was not fighting only for life. He was fighting for meaning, for the cub, for defiance, for the truth that weakness was not doom. But numbers weighed heavy. 3 hunters struck at once, spears stabbing. The man blocked one, shattered another, but a blade tore across his leg. He stumbled, breath sharp, vision blurring. The cub cried out, rushing forward despite his command. "Stop! Leave him!" For a heartbeat, the hunters paused. The small voice rang against the fire and stone. They had been told the cub was weak. They had been told it would never rise. Yet here it stood, eyes glowing silver in the smoke. The man forced himself up, dragging his staff across the stone. "Run!" he hissed at the cub. But the cub did not. Instead, it stepped in front of him, chest lifted, trembling but unbroken. "I'm not weak!" it shouted. And then something changed. The silver glow in its eyes spread across its body. Its scales shimmered like moonlight, pulsing with hidden strength. The air trembled. The hunters froze, their snarls fading into silence. The man, bleeding and broken, stared in shock. The cub was small, fragile, yet its glow lit the smoke like a star. The cub raised its voice again. I choose to live. The ground shook. A wave of silver light burst outward, slamming into the hunters. They screamed, thrown back down the cliffs, their bodies crashing into flames below. The fire roared higher, feeding on their fall. Silence followed, broken only by the crack of burning wood. The man dropped to his knees, breath ragged. The staff slipped from his hand. He stared at the cub, whose glow dimmed slowly but did not fade. It turned back to him, eyes wide with fear and hope. "Did I do wrong?" it whispered. The man shook his head, a weak laugh escaping his lips. "No, you did right. You showed them." He pulled the cub into his arms, holding it close despite the pain. "You're not doomed. You never were." But the battle was not over. From below, the sound of drums rose, deep, steady, unyielding. More hunters climbed, and behind them, cloaked in smoke, the High Elder himself ascended. His horns glowed with fire, his staff dripping sparks of dark power. The man staggered to his feet again, though every muscle begged to stop. He raised the staff, cracked and broken, but still his weapon. The cub pressed against his side, glowing faintly, ready though afraid. The High Elder's voice rolled like thunder. "One cub, one man, and you think you can break our law." The man spat blood, his eyes locked on the figure. "Not think, prove." The High Elder raised a staff, and the mountain itself seemed to groan. The last stand had begun.